Hello and welcome to the Kuimangi Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Rivera, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach, we do want to thank you for being here today. And on behalf of our Board of Directors, our advisors, our volunteers, and supporting members, we thank you for joining us. The Kuimangi Institute is an independent nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. Our focus is reflected in three main areas. We talk about experience, education, and exploration. We respect the path of academic balance, the creative pursuit of science, while advancing, conserving, and restoring a direct experience of the deeper human connection to all of life. It is part of our mission to expand our own experiential research with a multidisciplinary understanding that's available to us today. So as an educational institution, we take an open approach and we invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. These weekly discussions have had a full spectrum of topics, from neuroscience and anthropology, archaeology, archaeoastronomy, ecology, philosophy, mythology, shamanism, ritual, the hero's journey. It goes on and on and on.
Because it's a big universe and we like to go exploring.
From the arts to the sciences. And you're welcome to join us on these weekly conversations. We also have posted hundreds on webcasts and also podcasts on our website at kuimangiinstitute.com. All of our presentations are free, and as a nonprofit, of course, we want you to be a part of our inner circle. We invite you to become a supporting member, and we thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Kuimangi Institute. Today, we continue the conversation on the role of consciousness in mapping human evolution, and also that role of science and technology to support that balance needed as humanity goes forward. You know, amid this environmental degradation and social unrest and political divides and the distracting impact of technology, we also seen signs of a positive shift in global consciousness, one long predicted. We live in a time of extraordinary change. And while we continue to look at outer technology, the real solutions to mapping the future for humanity requires continued development of our own inner technology as well. Artificial intelligence will amplify human effectiveness, but it also threatens human autonomy. And you know, the well-known physicist Roger Penrose, in his book, The Emperor's New Mind, makes the argument that human consciousness and understanding are not reproducible in a computer, no matter how complex. So what are the solutions? Will we ever understand that true nature of consciousness and its role it plays in our collective journey? All roads lead to finding that meeting point, the balancing of science, technology, and human consciousness. Together, it will require collaboration of scientists, practitioners, educators, innovators, and artists to lead humanity to heal and navigate the future as a global family.
Well, it's also going to take the mystics. And I think this is something that the mystics have been talking about for millennia, is golden age to dark age. Where are we on that circuit? And what's it going to take to get there? I don't know if we've ever had a golden age in the past. It's certainly there in the annals of history, these hints, but I know that we've held that promise forever. Hey, guys, we can do better, right? Maybe it's just been a long incubation for our species, a long childhood before we finally mature to who we're meant to be. But we see that in the distance as a light at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're here to talk about today with Kiara Windrider. He's a psychotherapist with degrees in peace studies and international development and transpersonal counseling. And his book, Year Zero, Time of the Great Shift, we'll talk with him about this great shift. Are we at the precipice? And does it take the, as you mentioned, the signs of the dark ages that we're living in today? What defines a dark age? Look, we have, such a great lifestyle and longevity, unprecedented, and technology and all of this, but also here we are with so much unrest and ennui and confusion and all of that. How do we define a golden age, and how do we get there? And what has the promise been through the ages? So Kiara, born in India, India is where they've charted time so immense that it looks like each universe is a breath, all right, of its timeline. It breathes in and out, it's destroying and creating universes. He's traveled much of the world, through Peru, around the world, looking and collecting. What are the signs? What are the stories? What's science saying, as well as history, about the promise of a better time ahead? Welcome, Kiara. Good to have you here.
Wow, thank you for inviting me. This is amazing just to listen to your introduction and this journey that we're on. You know, such an incredible synthesis of science and mythology and history and technology, the human spirit awakening to itself within these massive cycles of time. You know, you mentioned Brian Swim, whose book, The Universe is a Green Dragon, has been one of my very favorites ever since I remember. And it's really about looking at the universe as an embodied organism. These portals between worlds, you know, it's not just a linear history. It's not just something we can go back into the past and look forward into the future. We're creating timelines each moment that we exist through consciousness. And consciousness connects so many different worlds, created worlds, creator worlds. We are beings of consciousness in this grand cycle of universal history. We're also going through cycles that are very quickly going to move us beyond what we call duality. Because what we understand today of this world, this universe, even ourselves, is perceived through eyes of duality, where something is always seen as an opposite of something else, good versus bad, positive and negative.
Dark age versus age of light, right?
Exactly.
So there you go.
And there's a purpose for all of this. There's a purpose for humanity being where we are in this grand evolutionary scheme. It's not an accident that, you know, we've developed reason to the exclusion of the heart, to the exclusion of the spirit. It's what the Sumerians referred to as the tree of knowledge, knowledge of good and evil. There was a place for it. It's not yet synchronized with the tree of life, but that's the journey ahead. Humanity is a transitional species, as Sri Aurobindo said. And we haven't seen the end of it yet, but we're getting there. And these cycles of time, these cycles of history, these cycles of unfolding reflect how we are moving from one age to another, what the gifts are within each of these ages, and how we can consciously move and integrate towards the next.
Tell us about your personal journey. You're born in India, where India talks about the yugas, these grand cycles of time, and this roller coaster ride that we've been on. How did that, growing up in that culture, how did that set the stage for you in the quest that you're on?
Well, it felt very natural for me ever since I was a kid. That yes, that's our purpose, that's our direction. You know, it was not something where I was feeling like the personal quest was more important than the universal, the planetary quest. They all went together ever since I remember. I remember at 7 years old, I wrote this poem where God and nature and mankind meet. There we journey with tired feet to create a world as best I can, where man lives with nature and God lives with man. So it's like, you know, all these belong together.
Beautiful.
We have split them apart. And that's the tragedy of these times. And you talked about the indigenous cultures and the shamanic traditions, which actually bring these together in a way that makes it fun and mysterious and joyful. So in
I've
my
often,
years,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I've often wondered, if you say that we split them apart, these two paths, that's the tragedy of our time, but maybe some people are positing it's the promise of our times, that we had to do that in order to create the science we had. and
Mhm.
that science is a tool that's going to help us achieve this goal. I mean, we would be heading into an ice age about now if it
Mhm.
wasn't for what our technology. And maybe we can just hit the right balance to
Exactly.
continue on
So
with a,
it's the balance of the internal technology and the external technology.
yeah.
Yeah.
So tragedy has been that we've um, emphasized one over the other rather than seeing that they belong together.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and it applies also to our journeys of life. We've emphasized mind over heart or spirit over body. And these things are now in this age finally coming together, or at least the promise of coming together is
Mhm.
there for us. So you asked about the yugas. There's in the Hindu or Vedic tradition, they talk about 4 yugas, starting from an age of light, descending into an age of darkness, returning to an age of light through intervening periods. And before we even talk about the yugas, I want to just share briefly an understanding of the mechanics of these yugas. What creates these yugas? There's 2 different cycles. One cycle has to do with the journey of our own sun around its twin star, which according to some traditions is Sirius, and together they're journeying around the galactic center.
Mhm.
So the 24,000-year cycle that Sri Yukteswar focuses on is this journey of our sun around Sirius. And at certain times in galactic history, our sun is closer to the galactic center. At certain times, it's further. When it's closer, we move into an age of light or Satyuga. When it's further, we move into an age of darkness. So it's not necessarily something that has moral ideas attached to it. It's not
It's
bitterly,
physics,
it's
you're
just
saying.
physics. It's
Get
just
closer to that black hole in the center of the galaxy. Yeah.
and the black hole is actually a mother star. So at the end of an age, which is where we are at now, what's happening is there's an emission of information and energy arriving from the center of our galaxy, this mother star that Paul Violette refers to as a mother star rather than a black hole. So there's what he refers to as a galactic superwave.
Mm.
This is informational. It's also cosmic rays and gamma rays moving past spherically through the Milky Way. And it's very, very close now to entering our particular solar system. And so as the galactic wave moves past what's known as the heliopause, which is the boundary of our electromagnetic sphere, it allows for all kinds of cosmic dust, cometary debris to come in, gravitationally attracted by the sun and by other bigger planets. And as this happens, it creates a new cycle for the sun, which leads to electromagnetic changes within the Earth and all the other planets. And we are right at the cusp of this now. And what this means for us on this planet, and this could happen within the next 5, 10, 15 years. So it's imminent. It's not just, thousands of years into the future anymore. So we could go later into mapping this, how we can tell how close this galactic wave is, how it's
Hey, but
influenced.
is this you adding science to a very ancient idea in India? Were they speaking of this in more mythic terms? And now you're adding here science. We know that this is at the center of our galaxy and electromagnetic waves. So are you converging the two then?
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
bridge for me has been when Sri Yukteswar speaks about a twin star that our sun revolves around. And he doesn't really go into it very much. And then he says, this is um, the initiation of the cycle of yugas, this journey. And then he also says that the yugas, as they move through ages of light and darkness, there's a period of time when it's not just a gradual progression, but a sudden activation. So all of this is like, okay, so there's some spiritual background to this. But then I've added a lot of my own understandings of science and physics and geology to see how it might synthesize together. So it's fascinating to me. I'm a synthesizer. I love putting all this together. And I've
So here's
been
a metaphor and here's some science that you can also say is a metaphor and help put in a framework
exactly.
to kind of validate what the old mystics have been saying.
And the same thing goes for, I remember when I was visiting the Mayas in 2009, and I met with Don Alejandro Cirillo, who's the chief of the Mayan Highlands. And he speaks a lot. This was before when people were talking about the Mayan calendar in
Right.
2012. And so everyone is focused on the calendar, the end of the calendar, what it means for humanity, what it means for the earth. And when I was talking with him, he said, no, that's not what the cycles or prophecies are about. You know, this is putting into linear terms a prophecy that's non-linear. And
Mm.
our prophecy is
Putting into linear terms, a prophecy that's not linear. What does
yeah,
that mean? A prophecy that's not linear.
that's simple, that where time is not understood as a sequence, it's multidimensional. There's many timelines, and we choose which timelines we want to travel.
Right.
Our consciousness then makes a difference. And he said, our prophecy is about 3 days of darkness. And that always intrigued me. So he didn't explain more than that. He didn't say this is what it means. It's metaphorical or it's literal. But it's like, what is that 3 days of darkness? Because many, many prophecies speak about this. There's Catholic Padre Pio prophecies about this. There's Hopi prophecies about this. There's Indian prophecies. So when you speak about the confluence of science with tradition, what I realized eventually is that this prophecy has to do with a reversal of the Earth's magnetic field. And this happens periodically.
Now that is a scientific fact. The Earth does reverse its magnetic field
And it
every so
happens
often.
very
Yeah.
regularly, according to some scientists like Robert Felix or even Ben Davidson and others. They speak about regular cycles of 12,000 years, which happens to be um, which happens to fit right into the 24,000-year cycle of Sri Yukteswar and the Four Ages. So it's like the journey from Satyuga down to Kali Yuga takes 12,000 years. From Kali Yuga to Satyuga takes 12,000 years. And each time we go through this transition point, we go through a magnetic reversal. And that reversal triggers the next phase of the cycle. So it's not just a gradual, progressive process. The trigger means that there's a quantum leap.
Again, physics.
The edge of that
Something
quantum.
and it's all driven by our star. Yeah.
It's driven by the journey of our star around Sirius, around the galactic center. So there's a timing to this. And of course, we are guided as a collective species to open up to ourselves in new ways at different times. And since the mid 1900s, there's been a tremendous expansion of the of personal development, of self-help, of spiritual awakening, new concepts, and also new understandings of science, the new physics. And the quantum
So it's
reality.
well timed because we're going to need that knowledge, aren't we?
Yeah.
And that experience. Yeah.
We don't just need that knowledge, we need to integrate it into our bodies so that our bodies can actually align with these new energies. So it's not just about a mental journey.
No.
I think that's where we talked about the evolution of our species. It's not just a gradually awakening evolution of the mind, but the body itself now is going through genetic and biological changes. In response,
Also understanding we're in a soup of a cosmic soup where there's a lot of energy coming through us, electromagnetic shifts, right?
Yeah.
We live in a sea of energy. So what is it? 99% of the magnetic spectrum is invisible to our eyes,
Mhm.
but we're developing that technology again to detect it, to understand it, and see its impact on us, right?
Well, this is again where science can be very useful.
Useful, yeah.
So there's the cosmology known as plasma
Yeah.
cosmology or the electric universe theory. And this posits that it's not gravitation that determines how universes are put together or galaxies are aligned with each other. It's electrical forces
Right.
through fields of plasma, which are the fifth element of matter. And plasma are electrical fields, it's just free floating ions, which then eventually, as they interact with magnetic fields, create what we call matter. So spirit and matter, plasma and matter, interact with each other across the galaxies. And then when there's magnetic fields that draw this together, it then creates worlds that we can actually inhabit with our physical senses, where consciousness can actually embody into a human or other form.
And we need to also understand in this big sea, this big soup that we're in, there's a lot of other celestial bodies out there,
This is a,
and they're all cross communicating. I mean, yeah.
and this is a significant part of what this institute's about as well. So I really appreciate the fact that you keep coming back to the embodied experience, that we need to have that integration, like you said, not just intellectual, not just
Yeah.
in our brains, but also that we're actually living it, that we're connected to it in that way. So
Yes.
And the message that we're getting are, we're part of a universe, this womb of
right.
creative womb of the universe. Yeah, a
And,
lot going on.
and also bringing it to today in my lifetime, because you're talking in terms of yugas, you're talking in terms of giant scale of time, but also just in where we're at now, all of us sitting in this room having this discussion. As
Yeah.
a psychotherapist, I know you have degrees in research into international development and all of that stuff, counseling, psychology. Where do we fit in? How can we participate? What is your message that like you said, beyond just the intellectual understanding, but simply how are we integrating this, and how, when we leave this session today, what do we take with us?
Beautiful. Yeah. So, okay. So let me bring together a few insights.
Yeah.
It's like jigsaw puzzles. You know, there's different pieces that fit together at different times, and then suddenly you see the whole. Until then, it just feels like a mess. And for many of us, you know, we've been in this mess. We've been living this mess for as long as we can remember. And now it's like these pieces are slowly coming together. So where we are today, we talked about the magnetic reversal, which is like a central piece here. The magnetic field of our planet began to weaken approximately 200 years ago, slowly at first, and then exponentially, while at the same time, the magnetic axis, the north and south polar axis, has also been shifting. Now, interestingly, the north polar axis shifts in one direction. So it's moving from where it was originally located in Alaska towards Siberia, so going this direction. And the south magnetic axis is leading in the opposite direction, so that these two magnetic polarities are actually converging in a region close to Bali, which is known as the Devil's Triangle. So on the opposite side of the Earth, a new magnetic vortex is being created, and this is in the area known as the Bermuda Triangle. So interesting that both these locations are associated with magnetic anomalies. So these are like emerging polarities, and there's not just one or two anymore. There's maybe 3 or 4 magnetic polarities that are simultaneously emerging as the magnetic field itself is collapsing. Now, if you put all this together and arrive at some kind of a 0 point, and I won't go into all the calculations because it can be quite,
complex. Yeah.
complex, but it could well be that the shift, as we call it, might happen within the next 10, 15 years.
And what does
Anywhere.
that even mean? What are the predictions about the shift in the?
So what does a shift mean? Yeah, so I would say that it's a shift from a linear experience of time to a multidimensional experience of time. A shift from primarily being uh, uh, located within a third dimensional experience of reality to a multidimensional experience of reality. So
Because
this is
our sense of reality is so dependent on the magnetic field that Earth generates that we live in.
so if you look at magnetic fields, we are a complex of 5 bodies, according to the Vedic tradition. So there's a physical body, obviously. It's known as the food body or Annamaya Kosha. Then there's the prana body or etheric body, which feeds the Annamaya Kosha. And this is what we access through breath, through energy work, through acupuncture, the meridians, the chakras, they're located in this body. Beyond that is the emotional body, the mental body, and then finally the soul body or the causal body. Now they're distinct from each other, and yet they interpenetrate and they're linked together through magnetic fields.
Oh,
What happens if there's a magnetic field collapse? What happens to these 5 bodies? And
they reconfigure their relationship.
exactly. And initially, they basically fall apart. They disassociate from each other,
Right.
which many of us
Dismember before you're put back together again, an old shamanic
Yeah,
dynamic. Yeah.
exactly. So we're experiencing some of that. Many of us are experiencing that we can't remember things anymore, or we're going through emotional dismemberment. Ideas and attitudes that were so safe and familiar are falling apart.
We get a little unhinged. Yeah.
Unhinged and just I mean, if we're not prepared for it, which many people are not, it's leading to a lot of ambivalence about living on this earth. It's leading to people wanting to commit suicide. It's leading to a sense of despair, helplessness, hopelessness, and loss. It's leading to chaos on political levels, economic levels, social levels. So, not understanding what this journey is about can be very, very difficult for humanity at this stage. Once we begin to understand, then we can gracefully go through this discombobulation where these 5 bodies can be allowed to dismember in order for a new memberment or remembering of the soul
Good play on words.
within these 5 bodies. So then the soul can actually anchor in a way that was never possible before, or at least not in our last few cycles.
So the mystics are really giving us a recipe, a hint, a sense of hope, because if this is every 12,000 years or even 24,000 years, humanity's in our 200,000 year history has been through this a few times.
Yes.
And so we've survived it, right? Yeah. And so those wise ones would say, let's put it in the mythology, let's put it into the cultural container. And maybe it's degraded through time, right? We do tend to have amnesia between these long periods. But what are the clues what do the mystics say? What is your tradition? You've looked at several others around the world. What are the clues, even in mythic terms or other languages? What do they say about this?
Yeah, so there's a Vedic term, pralaya, similar to the apocalypse, so similar to the Pachakuti of the Incas, which means that everything that's known and familiar dissolves. It's a turning upside down. It can lead to extinction events. So in the past, there has been a lot of extinction events. So
across the species,
lost millions of species, and at the same time, within a generation, a reconstitution of new species, because
punctuated equilibrium. They associate with a magnetic field reversal because it allows so many cosmic rays to come in and jumpstart mutations, for example. It's just one mechanism.
all these species still exist within the Akashic memory of the earth and within the Akashic records of the universe. So nothing dies, nothing goes truly extinct, but Mother Earth then can get to choose. Do I wish to revive this particular species? What's the next um, cycle of life going to look like? And that intelligence combined with whichever intelligent species exist on the planet, which Mother Earth calls into council with herself, including the human, but also including others.
So
Then
you're
we,
giving agency to Mother Earth and her wisdom, her cycles, her sense of rebalancing, and
yeah,
yeah,
we think of ourselves as somehow separate from Mother Earth, but we're not.
no, we're not.
We think of ourselves as part of maybe the left brain of Mother Earth. We are the left brain of Gaia. Whales are perhaps the right brain of Gaia. And we need each other to become whole brains together to be able to access these records,
And
which are,
she's talking a lot with us if we'll but listen, right?
Mm.
She's got a
yeah,
lot to say.
oh yeah. I mean, we know just the fact that we've ignored her, we've relegated her to a piece of dirt under our feet. We can mine her, we can rape her, we can do as we wish, take and not give back. This is all part of the tragedy of these times. That we've separated ourselves from Gaia, we've somehow placed ourselves on the top of this mythical ladder of creation and
Mm-hmm.
and forgotten everything else and ignored everything else. So I feel like there's enough people awakening now to who we truly are, remembering who we truly are, connecting with the indigenous wisdom that's always remembered this, Aboriginal wisdom and the native people from South, North America, in ancient India, across the world, the Celtic people, they're now coming back. And what's happening simultaneously is not just the knowledge that's coming back, but the people are coming back.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
these are
And their
indigenous
wisdom
people,
traditions.
the
Yeah.
wisdom traditions that are indigenous to humans,
Mm.
and there are wisdom traditions that belong to tribes known as the Shi or the Tuatha De Danann or the fairy kingdoms, the elfin kingdoms. They're real. They're real. They're not just mythologies created from our human minds. They just have separated from this dimension in order to either survive and protect themselves or to show the way when the time is right.
You know, it
And
is interesting that modern physics is telling us time may be an arrow, a two-way street, backward and forward. There's multiple dimensions to reality, or so the math says. I mean, physics is actually positing and suggesting a lot of what you're saying is possible.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's also interesting that technology allows us to retrieve those wisdom traditions and to look at our ancestors and look and see what they were about. I mean, it's helping us gather up that information
yeah.
as well. Um,
Yeah, and the
It is,
story of
and
the human spirit, that whole idea that we can maintain a thread of positivity,
yeah.
of optimism as we go along, because it's easy not to. It's easy to buy into the fact that, oh my God, everything's
Give up,
collapsing.
right?
I'm
It's
ready. I might as well
hopeless.
give up. And but then there's those of us that are saying,
Yeah.
okay, yes, but there is dysfunction, and it's hugely
Mm.
apparent right now. But if we can hold on to some kind of thread of optimism and also increase what you're referring to, that concept of global consciousness. So the fact is that the individuals take that moment of
Yeah.
time to connect with the human story within themselves, embedded spirituality, embodied spirituality, and then also then on the global scale being integrated. There has to be a shift. There has to be a change. It can't just be words and talking. And
yeah,
so that's where we're at now, where we're just looking at these things, and the negativity is winning the battle a lot of times, and at least on the public stage. So we have to see where those of us that want to hold the flag up of optimism and how that fits in.
right.
Well,
Paul,
also,
you
is
spoke
it like the
about
little gosling that's in its shell, right? The little hatchling in its shell. And I was just hearing the other day that it really takes the gumption and being called forth with all your strength of that little guy to break through the shell in order to thrive. So if you break the shell for the hatchling, they're not going to do as well as if you nature has asked them, hey, give it your give it your all.
Yeah.
And then you've called forth your
Well, yeah,
strength
that's true.
to then
Yeah.
go and thrive. And so it feels like that with us. We're being challenged. It's like
Metaphor.
all the Hollywood movies, here's the hero, the clock is ticking. You've got 5 seconds before the bomb goes off, and then the hero saves the day. But it took that moment before you really pull everything together. Every fiber of your being is
Mhm.
called forth to save the day.
Yeah.
Maybe nature has set that up in us.
Well, somehow we
Somehow
constantly,
it feels
I
like.
remember when I was in college, there was a term paper due by a certain deadline,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I could never, you know, start when I was supposed to. I'd always wait till the very last moment, the last night.
You got to have the heat on you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Those
then
deadlines approaching really motivate us. Yeah.
that's where the human species is today. We're at the edge of destruction.
Do or
The
die.
nuclear
Yeah.
clock is ticking away. It's do or die. We either go extinct or we move into a new stage that we've never experienced before. And it's not, well, there are things that already have been written out in in
In the
the
prophecies,
in the prophecies.
what
And
does it say? Yeah.
the prophecies are actually not just prophecies of the future, but they're memories of the past. So, prophecies like the 3 days of darkness, the prophecies of the Pralaya, they know what to expect because they've been through this in the past. They've just forgotten.
Mhm.
And as we begin to remember the old mythologies, the old stories that are written in rock and stone and written in the
And
stars,
they ring true within us. Yeah.
then it's like we are multidimensional. We exist within the rocks and the stones. We exist out in the stars. The memories are there. We can access those memories within ourselves, and this is what mystics do. But we can also access those memories through science if we allow science to become more open. I think the problem with science often has been that it's become too closed. It's become a religion in itself.
Yeah, I have to say.
Sense that, just because someone has said this in the past, put in the name of a revered scientist, we're not open to understanding something further, or we're not understanding to put things together in new ways. So it's like we're wedded to the insecurity of the known rather than opening to something that's maybe even more secure that has to do with the unknown, because that's the way our mind works. That's the way a human species has learned to survive. But Paul, earlier you had spoken about artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
I think this would be an interesting
segue.
theme to look at also, because artificial intelligence isn't about anything new.
It's about looking at the whole of human knowledge and mirroring it
It
back
has been
to
there,
us. The flaws in us are reflected in that, is the way I see it.
but through artificial intelligence, it's not possible to put together anything in a new way
Yeah.
because it's only about knowledge that exists already. It's
That's why
about
you mentioned Brian Swim. That's why next week with Brian Swim, it'll be interesting because he's looking at the evolution, the 14.7 billion year evolution of the universe and its cycles. We're following that same evolutionary cycle as well, that same dynamic.
right.
And that also predicts something new, right? We have to evolve to that next stage.
Well,
And
that's interesting because Sri Aurobindo, the yogi mystic, freedom fighter, who was very much part of the awakening journey in India, and also has been yogically looking out into the future. And he refers to the supramental force that exists outside of our current space-time dimension, is now entering into our created worlds. But he says that now, everything up until now has moved in cycles of polarity, darkness and light, night and day. But the next cycle, he calls this the seventh universe, is a path of it's a spiral of increasing vibration without the need to come down again into a cycle of destruction or darkness. So once we go through and reach a critical point, we can break free of the duality that has
Oh, put us on the
captured us.
pendulum swing.
Yeah, we're moving past that pendulum swing and
Mm.
just reaching to the stars. We are at a point now where creator consciousness can embody itself within creation, where spirit and matter become one movement, involution and evolution become one impulse rather than complementary to each other. And as this happens, then the seventh universe can begin, which means that we as creators, conscious of who we are, can then enter through creation into whatever we wish to create multidimensionally. And this is something that we haven't explored yet. This is what the Sumerian mythology refers to as the tree of life. So we've focused on the tree of knowledge, the mind, reason, and now we can integrate that with the heart, with the mind, or the mind can integrate with the heart, with intuition, with spirituality, with the soul, and with the body.
You reminded me of our conversation with Tyler Volk, in which he's looking at the dynamics and principles of the universe, the patterns, and he combogenesis is saying that with each evolution, there's new relationships, new possibilities, new evolution, new evolving dynamics. And so it just seems like we're evolving right there along with the universe and what's possible. Yeah, then that's quite the exciting journey that we're on, isn't it?
It's the most exciting journey they can be.
Yeah. And to really look at the big picture,
Yeah.
this is what this forum is about. Let's put all the pieces of the puzzle on the table through all the researchers and all the artists and everyone. If we can put all those pieces, then we'll see what new picture emerges when we can get a glimpse of the whole.
And I love the fact that we
Yeah.
can host a forum where we can have the mystics and the scientists in the same room. Let's talk and integrate what we know and what we don't know, and see where that takes us.
And are you saying the same thing in different languages? Right.
Right. It's like, looking at something through binoculars. One part of it is the physics, the other is the metaphysics.
Yeah.
And as you look at it in
a bicameral way, we get a deeper picture. Yeah.
Much deeper than ever. So yeah, they do go together.
We have a lot of comments from our audience, and I want to start with Gary Palish and thank Gary for the introductions and the connections to Kiara.
Comments, Gary?
Hello, Gary.
Hello, thank you. For me, what I think in my journey with Kiara and getting to know him was the realization that when you said, we're evolving and the universe is evolving, and, I've come to realize that while I'm a drop, the metaphor of the drop of rain merging into the ocean, that the ocean merges into the drop of rain. And it's, we have a tendency to look at ourselves as though we go into this, but we're already a part of it. It's already merged into me. And so I see us as evolving together. And I see us as, and that's something that, Kiara and I have spoken with a lot. And Kiara, I'd really like you to expand on that because you talk about it in your books.
Universe is quite the dance partner, isn't it?
Yeah. And you talk about it in your books a lot about this seeing ourselves as one with it all rather than separate from it all. And while that's a lovely thought, how does that actually come into that practical physical plane as well?
Yeah, tell us about your books.
Thank you, Gary, for that. This actually comes from something that Rumi wrote about. And he talks about 3 stages in the awakening process. The first stage is you're identified as a drop. And you're seeking, you're still looking for who you are. You identify with aspects of the human personality, and then you find that it's not enough. You start moving towards this ocean that seems to be the the goal of our spiritual journey, enlightenment, then you merge with it, you become one with all things. And for many people, that then becomes the end of the journey. And what he says then, no, that's only the second step. The third step, like you said, Gary, is when the ocean enters into the drop. This is when creator consciousness becomes so fully embodied within creation that we can then move into a next level of expression and understanding. So that has not been done much. We tend to focus more on the dissolution rather than the embodiment aspects. And the next cycle that I see for humanity as we go through this magnetic reversal is that of embodiment. This is when the ocean can enter into the drop. This is when we can totally surrender the personal self and become the universal self and experience ourselves as that on this earth. So, yes, there is a personal self, and you cannot deny that, and you don't need to, because that's beautiful. The mind, the ego is beautiful. By itself is incomplete. But then as my identity can move between the personal self and the planetary self and the galactic self, the cosmic self, the universal self, then I begin to experience how the great ocean can move through me to create new worlds. That's what the great mystery is about, in ways that the personal self can never grasp. And the personal self is so incomplete, so dull without that full experience. The drop is like a little speck of dust in the universe, whereas who we truly are is the entire universe.
You're beautifully confirming an experience that we have in our ritual body posture ecstatic trance states, in which we just expand, right? You just start to see through the eyes of the universe, or the eyes of Mother Earth, or the eyes of that experience is so accessible to us. And it's beyond words, right? It's
Gary, a follow-up, anything, or?
was
Okay, thank
beautiful.
you
Thank
so
you.
much for your contributions and introducing us to Kiara. So that's
always such
fantastic.
interesting people you hang with. So
Maybe I was going to invite Tony, because Tony's an astrophysicist, and it's a great way for that of you looking at all these traditions from wisdom traditions, and he's a cutting edge scientist looking at what's happening. But Tony's also has that element of mysticism in him as well. So it's a great way for us.
we also
to
have a Vedic
bring-
scholar here. We have somebody
Yeah.
looking at global consciousness. We've
we'll do
got
that as well. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Tony, you around? There you are. I know you asked a couple of questions in the chat room already.
Yes, I do. Well, thank you very much. I am unmuted, I hope.
No,
Of course, I'm looking forward to seeing how what Fred Smith has to say will emerge. But I'm loving what you're saying. It's really a great field to think about. But I have this way of asking questions which are not meant to be derogatory, but I'm just curious. What if we, as a human being, or a small group of human beings, goes to where there are not magnetic fields? What does that mean? Does it mean everything is constant, or do we somehow relate to the Genesis place that's Earth, for its magnetic field? And I'm also curious, I know that we are electromagnetic beings, and in graduate school I was fascinated. I had a 10 to the 16th ohm electrometer for some experiments I was running, and I could move it all around my body, and I could see the fields change of that very, very apparently. And we have the electromagnetic coupling, and I haven't thought much about it, but we do know that some animals couple to the magnetic field to migrate. I do wonder how this affects us.
do we have
And
those
then-
same receptor sites as well? I mean, we're tuned to it.
Well,
aren't we?
at some level, at some subtle level, we probably do. And so I'm very curious about this. And also, I've done quite a bit of archaeology research in a place called Chaco Canyon.
Yes.
And even over the course of several decades, the direction of magnetic north has changed markedly by several degrees. And this is actually a method used for dating in archaeology. So the change of the field, it's not like a binary thing where it's this way and now it's that way. It's moving around, and then eventually it does that. And it's not exactly 12,000 years, in my understanding. It can be anywhere from 2,000 to 12,000 years. So I'm just wondering, this does not negate in any way what you're saying, but this is how my scientific mind works to want to ask these questions of you.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I love this conversation. So, I mean, you can access some of this information directly through your studies, whereas for me, it's like I'm doing it secondhand through people that I've been in conversation with. So it's great that, you know, we can come to some kind of a deeper understanding. So I don't think you're right that these, like Ben Davidson is someone else that I've been following. And he breaks down these 12,000 year cycles into sub-cycles. So he's got the YouTube channel, Suspicious Observers. And he says, yes, within the 12,000 year cycle, there are harmonics. So, you know, there's harmonics of 6,000 years and 6,000 years, 4,000, 4,000, 4,000 years, and so on. And so things can happen within these moments also. They're more likely to happen in a bigger way when it's a 12,000 or 24,000 year cycle, but these things do happen more often as well. It would be really interesting for me to chart some of the geological events in the past on these harmonic nodes. Maybe you're the person to do that study.
Well, I'm afraid not. I'm more a look up person, although I have done some archaeology and I have an appreciation for these things, and also wondering, you know, connecting all the worlds that we're talking about, and yet there are direct manifestations. And Laura is right. There are some terrific questions that are being asked now. Sean Carroll was asking, what would happen if Schrodinger's equation started out with a different sign than it has now? And what would this mean for the whole universe as it's evolved, and what would it mean for us? These are questions being asked out of Caltech and places like that. So there's a wonderful nexus happening, and I so much appreciate what you're bringing to this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. You know, it also brings to mind the Milankovitch cycles, which are mostly associated with ice ages coming and going, the Earth's axis tilt, the eccentricity of the orbits, and those grand cycles. But you're making me wonder if there's more to that than just climate, if it's how those cycles are impacting us, because it all has to do with our relationship within our whole solar system and our sun. And I bet there's a lot more harmonics going on there.
Fred, I'm going to put you on.
All right.
There you are. So Fred is a recently retired, I guess, a professor emeritus of religious studies, Sanskrit, and Vedic
The
scholar, and all that
Vedas.
stuff.
Well, first, just for Kiara's information, everything I say is being fed to me by my parrot on my shoulder here. So you'll have to
A true
understand
mystic.
that there are
Yeah.
kinds of consciousness that might be melding as we speak. Yes, I'm very interested to hear what you've been talking about. The notion of harmonics. I mean, of course, I've been reading about it periodically for the last 40, 50 years, in various, you know, going back to the 70s. But it's something that in this kind of idiom is not exactly what I've been studying or writing about for as far as India is concerned, which is really my field. Well, there's these two major cyclic notions of yugas, of course, as you're very aware, in India. One is the one that goes for a couple of million years, which is in some of the texts called Puranas, which are the sectarian histories. and the other is in Mahabharata, which is what I've been working on really closely for quite a while, which is the 12,000-year period now. And according to all of these, we're kind of at the tail end of the the Kali Yuga, of the darker period, the period that approaches the end of the Yuganta, the end of the Yuga, and after which there's this pralaya, or cosmic dissolution for a while, then it remanifests again. But those are the narratives that are lived by in India with these. And as far as the harmonics are concerned, but this is just to say that there are these convergences, and there are these harmonics that have been addressed throughout Indian history, oftentimes looking at where the positions of the stars are. And the fact that it persists today after thousands of years of this is pretty remarkable, and attests, in my humble view, to some sort of accuracy, in some sense, accuracy. But it's
So what
also,
you're saying, Fred, is that if you can see it on a small daily scale, then why not those same dynamics on a longer timeline scale? You're
Exactly.
saying if these configurations are meaningful and charted through time, then why not step back and see a bigger picture of it? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? The scale?
But the bigger picture of it, this is what I want to hear from Kiara and want to learn about more, is why are we, because it's changing and there are these regularities and there are these constant positional changes, why are we moving in a positive direction?
Hmm.
That's my
Good
question.
question.
How do we know this? What's
Yeah.
Reassure us. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. So first of all, I'm very glad that you mentioned the two different yoga cycles. People often confuse them with each other. There's the larger universal yugas that have to do with our solar system and its journey around the galactic center, which could take millions of years. And then there's the cycle of the sun around Sirius, or its twin star, whichever that happens to be, in the little mini configurations. That's
Okay.
24,000 years. And I think the question of hope is really key. Like, how do we know that it's going to be something that, as we move into a dark age, that we're not going to destroy ourselves? Or if we do destroy ourselves, how do we know that is the end of existence? Is, the whole cycle of death and renewal begins to make more sense in this context. So it's like seasons, even the yoga cycle, that's seasons, rather than, darkness and light as moral values.
All shades of gray.
They're all shades of gray. And there's a process that, so Saturn, you mentioned Saturn, Mars opposition. Saturn is, when you're resisting Saturn, it can break you down. If you're aligned with Saturn, if you make friends with Saturn, it can become a teacher.
An ally.
An ally. And I think that's where we are. We're at a phase now in human history where we have resisted so long, resisted this, the inner aspect of our being, that it's no longer possible. And that's what's going to happen. Then Saturn comes into play and breaks down old systems and then rebuilds. And interestingly, as I'm looking at astrology, tropical astrology, because in Vedic astrology, Pluto didn't even exist. Right now, Pluto is going, the US is going through its Pluto return. And that's a 248-year cycle, and 1776 plus that makes it right about now. And earlier this year, I think we already went through 3 or 4 of these Pluto conjunctions, And in October will be the final conjunction as it moves on. So the choice we're given, and I'm including all of us because the US in some way, being the melting pot of the world, has represented humanity, not always in a good way, and often in a way that's created a lot of not so good outcomes for
Shadow side.
Yeah.
but as we go through this Pluto return, we have the possibility, we have the option of going through into the positive aspects of what might come. We also, of course, have the option of collapsing completely as a nation, as a society, as an economy, as a planet. Those options out there. So what gives me hope in all of this is going beyond this to a bigger picture. So, I don't think we are smart enough to really understand the big picture by ourselves. So for me, I look at mystics like Sri Aurobindo, Peter Donov, some of the ancient Mayas and others that have been able to pierce the veil to look at other timelines than our own, and can then bring in something from beyond into the current cycle. So what Sri Aurobindo talks about, this is someone that I've really treasured and as a voice for this awakening time. And he says that it's before he refers to a supramental awakening or a supramental descent of this unified force. But he says before the supramental descent can be fully actualized, there will be a supramental catastrophe. It's inevitable. And what the supramental catastrophe is, in his definition, is all the shadows of our human history coming to the surface at this time. It has to come to the surface to be revealed and then to be transmuted. So anything within a personal story or within the collective story that has been shadowed. So when you look at the Pluto return, for instance, in the US chart, there's shadows of genocide having to do with the African nations, Native American nations. It has to do with current hegemony around the world. And those shadows of genocide need to be confronted. Hopefully someone like RFK Jr. can be a voice in doing so. Otherwise, I feel like, we're going to have to go through a much darker period of renewal. We will go through a renewal anyway, because this is
Part
all
of the curriculum.
response to the supramental descent, which is already happening. It cannot be stopped anymore.
Yeah.
It's already existing within the higher worlds. Mystics have already traveled there. They can see this, how it's been moving.
What gives me hope is that if there's a dismemberment on the way to rememberment, that just seems to be a natural cycle. I can't tell you how many times in our work, you're getting dismembered in a certain way. You surrender to it. It's such a wonderful release. And that's a necessary step for the rebirth, for the reconfiguration in this new way. I mean, we see it in many cycles over and over again. And also that this promise that it seems the mystics of old, or those cultures who've been through something like this, if they're putting it there in the cultural container, and they're saying this is a prediction, this is a promise, with certainty we can say this, because it seems to be based on the anatomy of our galaxy. This is the way that galaxies configured. This is the dynamics. This is the evolutionary pathway that this happens. I find solace in that because, similar to our work, we're basing it upon the anatomy, the inner technology, the physiology. This is the capacity, this is the promise, this is the functioning of it. This seems to be inevitable. And so if it's based on something that firm, hey, it's just the way the design of the universe, the design of us, then I'm like, oh yeah, I trust in the process. I trust in the creation. I trust in the design, and I'm willing to follow the grand cycles within my own microcycle. I feel
That's
trust in
real
that
key
because
understanding.
there's the
Laura.
promise of life, death, and rebirth. There's promise there. It's a well-trod pathway.
Yeah.
So I find reassurance in what you're saying that way as well. Yeah.
And then there's a flexibility to that
Yeah.
once you have that kind of experience, that you're
Yeah.
not holding on and gripping on to one particular reality to the point of driving yourself to that
Or stopping the process.
stopping
You're
the
going to stop the
process.
flow. This
Right.
is the flow. Ride the board.
Yeah.
And don't be pummeled under the wave. Ride it.
I'm in the
Yeah.
flow state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So
Well,
Fred, thank you very much. Did you have another comment?
No, I'm very interested to listen, however. I don't.
Okay. I
I
want to
have-
mention
thank
that
you, and Papa
Fred has been a guest on our program several times. Ancient trance states in India. Trance states in India was one of the topics I can remember off the top of my head. Great discussions with Fred. So please check those out on our YouTube channel. Okay, now back to this. Kiara, so where are we at? What do you?
Brian and then
Okay.
Gary.
Okay,
Yes.
Brian.
Yeah. Brian, looking at many avenues of global consciousness.
Kiara, it's very interesting to hear you speak today. And I feel like you're kind of making space for our inner experience, our interiority, to have validity alongside the scientific. So we're living somehow through an era where science and spirituality seem to want to come together, but in a wholesome, in a way that respects the nature of both inquiries.
Yeah.
So I wonder how you see the great work for yourself. How have you encountered what your great work, maybe it's a great work as you might put it forth, that we as a species could be engaged with at this time? Your writings, I look forward to, reading more and learning. How would you articulate the great work of our time right now?
wow, that is such an important question. What is the great work of this time? And in the medieval ages, it was alchemy, and it was understood as transmuting lead into gold. And I think for our age, it's transmuting also, but it's like a fractured human consciousness into an integrated human consciousness. And it's where psychology and spirituality and science and all these disciplines come together. I know so many people who are spiritually illumined, but psychologically they're a mess. I know scientists who are stuck in their own religion of understanding without being able to access other possibilities. And I think the great work of this time is to be more open to what wants to come through from within ourselves. And I think there's something that's saying from the Gospel of the Acts, or maybe the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus says, let that which is within you come forth, and if it doesn't come forth, it's going to kill you. It's going to fracture you. And I think what we've done is we've closed down our minds to such an extent that we've become fractured in our own wastes. So I think that's a big part of it. Our educational system has become so densified. We have developed more and more of the ability to what's the word for it? To specialize in smaller and smaller pieces, rather than synthesize and hold new possibilities within our consciousness. And to remember that we are consciousness. We think that consciousness somehow derived from our nervous system, from our human evolution, from the formation of life itself. But consciousness is primary. It's consciousness that
Bottom line substrata. Yeah.
It's a substrata remembering itself through human forms and nervous system, through our experiences of life. So this is where the external and the internal can be joined together. We are consciousness remembering ourselves as human beings. So to me, that is like what alchemy is really about: as above, so below; as within, so without. So that hasn't changed. I think the context has changed, but our place in history has changed, but the great work remains.
We've been with Brian asking questions like, because we're so enamored with what we want, but we've been turning the question around with Brian and saying, what does Mother Earth want of us?
Yeah.
What does the universe want of us? And making space for what wants to emerge and working with it in harmony,
Yeah.
or at least
Mo-
approaching that stance best we can. Yeah.
Moving from the me to the we. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. Your encounters with other species. What you have learned and what draws you to want that encounter. I'd be very interested to hear.
Tell us about the dolphins, for example.
Oh, so I spent many months back in the late 90s swimming with dolphins in Hawaii, which was amazing because, as I spent more and more time with them, my sense of human identity began to loosen up. Eventually, I realized that, dolphins don't see us in the way that we see them. To me, it was like I, as a human, am swimming with dolphins in the ocean. For them, they're just being and interbeing. And so it's like I had to let go of my identity as a human, and then I could really be and interbe with them. So it was a very, very different experience. And Brian, when you're talking about we are reflections of Gaia, what does Gaia want from us? That's the question. What does Gaia want as us? Because we're not separate. And after a few months swimming with dolphins, I had this experience with a humpback whale. Now she came in close to shore with her baby, and I saw her from a distance. I jumped in, swam out to where I'd seen her, but then she was gone. So I just, closed my eyes, went into that state of interbeing that I'd learned from the dolphins. When I opened my eyes, the mother whale was directly beneath, about 10 feet below. And at first I was like, whoa, this is, well, it was either, it was both terrifying and awesome. Because, I just, when the first moment of panic, what if she flips her tail and I'm just flying through the air? Then I realized that she was very, very aware of my frail human presence. And as I relaxed, something started to happen that had never happened before for me, which is that there was a space that opened up behind the back of my head, which is the same spot in the whales as their blowhole. So it's the communication through breath, through into the higher self. And as that happened, I felt like the spherical connection began to happen with Mother Earth. So this way, our chakras are linear. We have a linear connection of above and below. But this way, I felt like I was becoming Gaia. I was becoming the Earth. If I had expanded further, I could become the solar system. I could even become a galaxy. And I realized this is how whales experience consciousness. They're not so fractured as we are. They're not so stuck in one single dimension as we are. And that's why they're the record keepers. They have access to information, to wisdom, to awareness across galaxies, which they can focus for us if we choose that. They can bring that into our awareness if we're open to that. And that's something I started to experience more and more. So once I'd had that experience, they remained with me. I could access them through this portal. And from that space, open to new information, open to a creative flow. So when I'm writing, for instance, I just open up into that space and the words come through. Some people would call it channeling. I don't call it channeling because it's an embodied experience. I am all of that. I'm not this person's self stuck in this linear consciousness.
You bring up a really interesting point. They've got massive brains. Who are we to say how they're used, how the receptor sites are connected
Right.
to all the fields, how many fields? They certainly can communicate across miles in the ocean with their voice.
Yeah.
And why not? What is their sonar doing? I mean, that's a really good, how do we know that our form of consciousness is the only one or the only way to experience it? Or that
Arrogant.
our brains in their limited capacity is the only way to be, wow.
Many-
Interesting.
Yeah,
And
many-
I felt that back of the head. Wow.
I was going to say in the early 2000s, maybe it was even the late 1990s, BBC did a show called Supernature, just talking about nature itself and all of these
Yeah.
abilities that we kind of dismiss in humanity of not having, but yet it's everywhere in nature. These
Immense
facili-
capacities of other species
Exactly.
to detect their universe. Think of a
Yeah.
dog's nose or at the
it was
hearing.
so inspirational
Yeah.
that we designed a workshop around it, because it's like we need to
Mhm.
break this boundary of thinking all these limited thoughts about what the experience can be. When you look to
Yeah.
when you look to nature, we get evidence that it's all there.
And
Because-
that you can merge, at least in these various states, into the consciousness of other species and
Yeah.
see through their eyes, feel
Mm.
their
I love the
senses.
Avatar movies. Avatar
Oh,
one,
yeah.
two,
Yes.
it really reflects that. Aiwa is the single organic consciousness that holds every single species on Pandora. And all the past, the memories of the past, even the, like when the biologist dies and she's taken up into Aiwa, her consciousness becomes part of Aiwa. And this is the way it is.
Yeah.
And what I realize is that after watching the movie a few times, I suddenly came to this conclusion that Aiwa, James
Cameron, yeah.
Cameron spent a lot of time in the Amazon,
Mhm.
ayahuasca with the shamans. And
Yeah.
Aiwa could be a derivation of ayahuasca.
Nice.
And look how popular those movies are because it's speaking something to us that
Yeah.
we've forgotten
Yeah, yeah.
or need to hear.
Oh, just a reminder. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
even the trees, the relationship we
Yeah.
have with trees. Most of tree life happens underground with the rootlets, with the mycelium, with the mushrooms and
The
it's like-
communication, the sharing, yeah.
Right. And we only see the surface.
Yeah.
Just
It's
we
like
see
a
the
brain
surface.
down there, isn't it? With all that neural net. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Brian, a
Thank you.
follow-up?
Thank you. No, that's good. I'll let someone else have a chance. Thank you very much, Kiara.
Thank
Brian,
you.
that gives us lots to talk about at our next global consciousness
Yes, it does.
gathering. So yeah,
Oh,
Good.
yeah.
Thank
good.
you.
Oh, heavens.
Thank you. All right. Well, I want to go back to the chat room for a second because two questions
Yeah.
came up. First of all, Fred said, have you written about the dynamics of whale or dolphin consciousness? And then, of course, Tony had to chime in and say, I wonder what a whale posture would look like. Let's try it.
Our metamorphosis postures, Tony, and
Yeah.
ask that very question.
Yeah.
Interesting. Speaking of
that-
early ancestors, I just want to say that even in Jean Auel's book about Clan of the Cave Bear, and where she's looking at the, really based on science, and she's projecting in a fictional story what life was like for our ancestors and the Neanderthal tribes that they encountered. I just remember one scene where she describes the Neanderthal woman walking through new territory, and she wants to know if her ancestors have ever been there before. So she takes a little bit of the soil and she tastes it. And from that, she's able to grok information that they have been there before because there's a remembrance. And I've always been impressed by that even Jean Auel, who I got to meet, I was a fan, would project that out as a way for our ancestors to open up their bandwidth and remember. Neanderthal had bigger brains than ours, by the way. And I thought, well, how interesting and how intuitive, because back when she was writing a few decades ago, we weren't cognizant of the soil containing so much microbial life that was communicating, as you said, underground, that it has vast neural networks with the mycelium, which is now a big thing, and with the exchange of information, nutrients, water, and all that it needs, that there's a rich life going underground. And that we can be a part of it, that we can communicate with it. And so even though this just fictional gesture, I think just it stayed with me to go, wow, yes, we are in tune with our environment in ways that we're not even consciously aware of, or that perhaps we've forgotten. And that with our science, now we're able to reconnect, to write our relationship.
Mm.
Like
I love
our
those-
ancestors
that
were about
series-
writing that relationship. Go ahead, Kiara. Yeah.
that series of books by Jane Austen. When she talks about the Neanderthals, I'm reminded also of what Colin Wilson says
Mhm.
about them,
Yeah.
that they are the ones that built the pyramids. They are the ones who had the ability to move stones through sound, to shape rock, to, because of the neuronal synapses in the brain were much more activated than the next species that came along. Because the next species that came along carried a lot of trauma from the death of Atlantis, which then, froze those neural pathways. So what does that mean for us? Can we awaken those neural pathways once again? And what would that mean? This is really what our journey is about, I think. So Sri Aurobindo says this is a transitional species. The next root race will have the full genetic ability that the Neanderthals did, plus more, because now the rationality that we've developed, the science, the technology that we've developed through reason can be integrated in new ways with what's possible with our inner technologies and intuition. So
And I find great comfort in that, to think that we are equipped with far more than we are using today. We
Yeah.
come designed and equipped with more capacities that will be useful in our future. And I also
Yeah,
appreciate the hero's journey, right? I mean, I have to liken this to that, we meet mentors and you could call them fairy godmothers in the fairy tales, and that give you a gift, and you may not know what that gift is useful for. They're gifting you. So you put it in your pocket, and it's only later when you're challenged that let me pull it. Oh, it's the exact tool I need. This is what I need to get through the threshold guardian and
Mhm.
continue on my journey. So it's interesting how again and again, we're discovering there's more to us that
Yeah.
we're,
Let me get back to Fred's
yeah.
question.
Yeah, Fred, yeah.
So yes, there is a book that I've written.
Oh,
called
the
Ilahi
books, yes.
Nur. It's called Ilahi Nur, Awakening the Divine Human. And so what I learned from the whale is about activating what I call the whale chakra behind the back of the head, and how that can be then integrated with other pathways within the brain. So there's the limbic system, which is connected with the ancient past. There's the prefrontal lobes that are connected with what could be our future, the subconscious, the superconscious, the heart, the back of the heart. The back of the heart has to do with elemental consciousness. It connects us to the worlds of nature. It's what the Hawaiians refer to as the low self, not the lower self, but the low self, Unihipile, which has to do with our relationship with the nature spirits. All of this has been neglected and is being reconnected now. So this is a system that I evolved after spending some time in Egypt. I was living in Turkey at the time, based on the archetypes of ancient Egypt and what that means for us today, because all those archetypes still exist within us. And then developing these pathways, opening to those archetypes in a way that we can become more multidimensional by connecting up what's being forgotten. So I wrote that several years ago, and then I've been traveling and teaching the Ilahi Nur work, various places around the world. And every place I go, what touches me is that very quickly, it's not about taking a lot of time, but very quickly people are able to access that same consciousness for themselves, the same ability to tap into the hall of records, to open up to this multidimensional world within themselves.
Because we're designed to do so.
Designed, yeah, this is all inside us already. is just finding the keys, like you said, that stone hidden in your pocket that's now ready to be grasped.
Yeah. Become equipped with the keys as well. Just have to connect them up. Wow. Tell us about your book, Year Zero, Time of the Great Shift.
Okay, this was one of the first books where I started putting together the science, the geology, the astrophysics with more of the indigenous understanding of these cycles of time, the ancient Indian system of the yugas, psychological models, along with my own personal experiences. In a way that, year zero is the 0 point, is that 3 days of darkness that we journey through, move through this magnetic reversal, and then eventually, or not eventually, maybe very quickly, because we're going through this quantum leap, it's not about linear time anymore. Enter the new human race, or manifest or reveal the new human. So that book was written quite a few years ago. Since then, there's been a reprint, a new edition, which has more stuff put together, called Gaia Luminous. So Gaia Luminous represents, this planet, planetary consciousness, just like our own consciousness. She has a physical body that we call the Earth. She has the etheric body, which is, different realms and timelines, energy systems and ley lines. She has her mental body, which Teilhard de Chardin referred to as the noosphere. And this interacts, with our human and other species to open up new possibilities. This is also what I sense is the mechanism for the creation of crop circles. So it's plasma entering in from the noosphere, being attracted to water beneath the soil, like in parts of England. And then that as those intelligences within plasma begin to interact with the water element, suddenly, within seconds, the whole crop circle can be experienced. And just like with us, suddenly within seconds, new genetic pathways can be opened. So our interaction with this level of the Earth, the emotional body and the mental body of the Earth, of Gaia, is also part of it. And then there's the soul consciousness of the Earth, which we can also communicate with as we go deeper into our own soul through the causal body. So, so what the whales opened up was this access point to join the soul of the Earth. So literally we become Gaia. So Gaia Luminous is about just like we as humans are evolving to the next level of our own potential as Homo Luminous, so is Gaia evolving into Gaia Luminous. So what does the structure look like? And how can we participate in this?
One thing that keeps coming to us is that we are the technology that can detect all of these different levels because we have it, right? We wouldn't have the physical and the prana and the emotional and the mental and the soul body integrated if we also weren't equipped with the way to detect it and integrate it, right? And to hear it, to dialogue with it, that must be part of the hardware that we're given or the software that we're issued. We are the technology to open our bandwidth and communicate with all that. It must be delivered with the actual physiology and all the whatever else that we have. So we have that capacity within. So that is also a message of hope. This is just part of our evolution. You talk about whales who you're, by summarizing what you're saying, you would say, well, they've been on the planet for these millions of years. They've had time to evolve to their full potential. What are we, 200,000 years old? Although we have a good lineage. I mean, we're in our infancy, right? So I guess we're in our natural maturation cycle. This might be where we're headed if we don't blow ourselves up in the meantime. But I appreciate what Brian Swim is going to say also next week, that, hey, actually we're 14.7 billion years old, because we are part and parcel of the universe. If you see us as a whole,
Right.
then we're just these set of eyeballs over here to see the universe. We are part of the whole. Our brainstem is part of that whole neural net of this universe. So, I mean, telling ourselves this new story, understanding ourselves in this greater context, having this conversation, you writing your books, doing what you're doing, having all of this just
Contributing.
as part of the process.
Right.
Well, this is just an inevitable part of the process to dialogue with this, and then to integrate all of this together. So I think we're well on our way. What other tips would you give us about helping to collectively, you know, open up and embrace this
I
as we
think
get dismembered, to also put the pieces in place for our,
with the mystery is a big piece of it.
yeah.
You know, like there's a passage from I just as I was writing last night, a passage came through. Let me read that. It's
Oh, yes, please. Let's have a reading. Yeah.
So this is something that's been in ever the last couple of weeks, since I arrived in Sedona, traveling with Gary to Santa Fe, and then here in Southern California. It's like there's this whole explosion of creativity that started to happen. And okay, so this is part of a trilogy that I'm writing. It's the third book in the trilogy, and it has to do with the expanded story of Jesus and his wife, Miran, in Kashmir. And I won't go into the story now, but this particular piece of it has to do with their daughter, Elmira, who is invited by the Great Mother to become the Manu of the next root race. In other words, she's like a template of new possibilities for the next human species. And the journey, her experience of what that means, and growing into it, and her connection with the soul of the earth, and the teachers that supported her in this way. So what came through this morning, it's a short chapter. So it's called The Dream. Isa had come back home from his travels, leaving the boys behind in England to pursue their own destinies. There's always something so beautiful and ecstatic about being greeted by loved ones after a long absence. And even though we could never really be apart anymore, it was a wonderful homecoming for us all. So after years of being away, I had a dream just before his return, in which a number of prisoners had been sentenced to death and were to be executed. Just before their execution, they were granted the gift of immortality by a capricious God. And so every day for the rest of their lives, they would be taken out to be executed and then returned to the safety of their cells. The dream somehow highlighted for me the pointless existence of most of humanity. Many people are dead already, but do not know it. They're too afraid to die, and yet too afraid to live. They've entered a treadmill of existential suffering from which there is no hope of escape. In their case, the idea of immortality had become a curse, and these poor prisoners yearned to be lifted out from their endless cycle of pointless existence. I recognized that the dream reflected an entire root race of humanity who were trapped in the treadmill of the mind, where a narrow band of perception, and especially a cultural conditioning around the afterlife, has kept them chained in a slow dance of death. Humanity was trapped in a false dance of immortality, where the safety of tomorrow became more important than living each moment today, where they were afraid to exchange the insecurity of the known for the security of the unknown, where the fear of death became a fear of life, where people died slowly each moment without knowing they were already dead. People had become slaves of habits, slaves of routine, slaves of perception that never carried far. They had become slaves to ideas of progress or ideas of religion, ideas of intelligence and self-importance that froze the heart and killed the soul. As the four of us came together the day of Isa's return, we knew the time had come to break the spell, and that the prisoners of my dream were ready to be set free.
Break the spell. Yeah.
Wow.
You know, it seems like humanity has this date approaching with a dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And I find that those dark nights of the soul, we've all been through them, but they're actually really useful because they force you to let go.
Yeah.
Right? When you realize, hey, what I've been doing was working up to now, but the road has changed on my hero's journey. The path has become a different landscape. It's no longer working. I have to let go. It's more painful to let go than to remain doing what I'm doing. It's more painful to stay doing what I'm doing than to let go. It's
Right.
the reverse. And so you just let go, right? And you break down, you're dismembering yourself to go into a new configuration. I just find that if we can embrace our dark nights of the soul on an individual level, it does help prepare us for this collective one that you say is approaching. This,
And how
you've described that humanity's got a date with catastrophe. So
and with what you
Yeah.
just shared with us, I mean, how many of us can see ourselves in those sentences of
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
dilemma between, that dilemma
being
of
afraid to
being
live
afraid to live,
because you're
being
afraid to die.
afraid to live, right?
Because you're afraid to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I guess those
Wow.
nadirs are really useful. Because you get the punctuated equilibrium, you know, you're just open to every change. You're going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Kelly, you had a question or comment?
Yes, thank you so much, Kiara. This has been such a beautiful discussion, and I loved your writing just now. It really moved me. I get so emotional sometimes when I speak about more spiritual things because it's just so nice to sit in a room with like minds, and like in our trances, Felicitas always says, you know, 1 foot in one world, 1 foot in the other. And I feel like what you said earlier about we're in the understanding, and when we're done understanding, we have to go forth gracefully. And that spoke to me because I feel like sometimes that's the problem with everyone talking to one another is there is no grace, and people don't know how to speak to each other because it's like their ego is talking. And so if some of us could just drop that and everyone be like they are here, you know, I just feel like so much could change. And Tony's talking to you and you have a science mind, and you have like, so when I'm looking at the screen, it was just beautiful that we're all in this place together and we've dropped the egos and we're trying to understand and we're trying to have grace. I loved how you put that, and I think about it all the time. So thank you so much. Oh, my dogs are barking, but
That's okay.
I did want to ask, what would you suggest for the first book for a beginner to read on, say, the veil is coming off and wanting to learn more?
Good question.
Good question.
Thank you, Kelly.
No, don't do that.
Oh yeah, and thank you for just being so much in your heart. It's very easy to see.
Thank
I would say the first book, and if you're looking at it from a science perspective and trying to understand the big picture, it would be Gaia Luminous. if you're looking to do something more practical, like practices and exercises to build the light body, Homo luminous. And then this trilogy, Isa is well, Isa, son of the sun, Niran, daughter of the moon, and Elmira, child of the stars. It's basically a metaphor for our awakening today. And it's written as a story that people can relate to. So it's not necessarily going into the logical mind. That's something, it's like a hero's journey that can touch the heart. So the first two of those will be published by the end of this month. They should be on Amazon. And the third one I'm in the midst of writing now, which is Red From. So that should be hopefully done in a few months. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I can't help but ask you about your writing process, because today's world, there's so much going on, and we're always thinking we're going to have more time. Where do you find that core time for that spirit to manifest itself?
Well, that's the core. I find that if I don't get that, then nothing else falls into place.
Yes.
Everything else falls apart.
The inner office hours, I call them.
Yeah.
What happens to me is, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm up and I'm wide awake, and there's no way to go back to sleep because it's just this transmission. And it's like I can feel this, body of awareness, information swirling around above, and just allowing it to sink through. And I usually get the first line of what I'm supposed to say.
Yep.
And then that just very easily and naturally begins to unfold. I'm just sitting on the typewriter or computer these days, and it just happens. And often it includes the events of the day, from the day before, conversations I've had with people, reflections that are coming into my own mind. And so it's like the universe is writing the story through this scribe.
Yeah.
And this, so I go back later and read it. My God, who wrote that? It's fascinating to just.
I'm one of the 3 a.m. people. I wake up like clockwork. Have all my life. And so did my mother. My mother tried to fight it. Like, I should go to sleep. I should go to sleep. And she's full of anxiety. Enjoy it, because there's no choice. You're not going back to sleep. Enjoy it. But then I read this research where there used to be quite in our culture acknowledgement over first sleep and second sleep. And that it seems to be a natural cycle for many, many people, that you just wake up in the middle of the night and people would spend an hour or two talking or conversing or reading or sex and everything else. But it was just like a piece of your day that was valued, and you weren't trying to go back to sleep. Then you go back to sleep and then wake up. But also talking with John Perkins and I think Mark Plotkin about who worked with various tribes, they're saying they don't sleep 8 hours a day. They wake up, they check the perimeter of the village, make sure everybody's okay, then go back to sleep.
Yeah.
So I agree that it's not like we need to sleep 8 hours in a solid line. That is precious time in the middle of the night to wake up. So
What's
use it.
interesting is if I tell myself that I need 8 hours of sleep, I get up really lethargic.
Yeah.
Because in a way, the body is over sleeping. I sleep when I want to sleep, when I need to sleep, and then I'm awake 2-3 hours later. It's just a natural cycle. And I'm awake, in this creative space, or wide awake, insightful space.
And like the ethers are quiet and the universe has opened up to you, and you're you're right there to see it in dialogue.
And that's the only time of silence sometimes in the midst of all the chaos around us.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
sort of
me and the universe time.
That sort of ties into what Laura mentioned earlier, is that we are the technology, that it all exists within us. And it's fantastic
How do you
when you look at the indigenous ways and some of the ways that plant medicine has been used, but also part of the
Mhm.
focus of this institute has been that one avenue of what's just natural in the physiology that we can tap into. What is it without using any kind of outside agent? What would happen if we just took time to connect in that way? So as an author, but also just as a person on that journey of life, that integration of spirit, being able to have that facility developed within ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's, I think it's about what Joseph Campbell says, following your bliss. What is
Following
your
your
bliss?
bliss.
And just
Yeah.
follow.
That's one of the meters within us, right?
Yeah.
Ding, 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 bliss. Okay, let's go there. Right? We
Right.
have a homing pigeon. We have an inner GPS for that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
in closing, I do want to give Gary the last
Good,
word
me
as
too.
because he was so
He
generous.
started it off
Yeah,
here.
he's the one
Oh.
that invited us to dialogue with you. So Gary, final comments
Yeah.
from your side.
Well, Fred asked a great question about hope.
Hmm.
And when I ask myself that question a lot, I used to, because if I develop linear models of space and time, I don't see a lot of hope.
Mhm.
But I realize the hope for me is that when I look at myself, and I look at myself as members of this biological species that has this survival instinct, that the hope is a lot of times that I don't change unless I've got under pressure.
Mhm.
And it feels like I can't change unless I get my attention is directed. And it seems to me like the blessing that we've received, even though sometimes it's a double-edged sword, the blessing is that we're under pressure right now as a species. We have a choice that's in front of us. And yesterday, Kiara and I and 5 friends were out hiking in a wonderful place, a 600-acre retreat center. And we were headed up to a magical place I wanted to take everybody to. And what was right in front of us, laying across the trail, was a 6-foot rattlesnake. A 6-foot beautiful red rattlesnake. And it couldn't have been a greater example of this, because a rattlesnake gets your attention. And Native American spirituality is very much about death and rebirth, the shedding of skins. And, that's where we're at right now, is that choice. And I believe that's the real hope. The real hope is this group of people that have come together to take this moment with Kiara. And that his work and the work of Cuyamonga Institute is really about being able to lift the veil that separates us. We want the apocalypse, to lift that veil that's separating us from the choice that we have to do something with consciousness that's exponential. And that to me is the hope in the writings of Kiara and what you presented. So thank you guys very much for doing this.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah,
Yeah.
well said.
Dave, one more thing to add to that. and
Yes.
about, this particular time, in many traditions, it's called Pachakuti, which means turning upside down. But really, what it means for us today is turning back right side up, because we've
I
been
see.
upside down for such a long time, and that's a symbol of hope.
Mhm.
Beautifully said.
I mean, it's sort of indicative that this moment in time when you have all this fake news that right is wrong and wrong is right and black is white and black, we're living in an inverted time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to write a relationship with ourselves, our community, our universe, is really to go back to center, right? To find that.
And if I can say the one final thought, and that is that in our effort
Yeah.
as humanity to correct wrongs of the past, let's be careful not to go too tribal and separate ourselves out from each other. That we
Okay.
all need to have a map forward for integration, for unification, that all of the backgrounds and all of the things in the past that need to be corrected, do so. But at the same time, let's integrate ourselves as a global family. That's where I think that the answer will lie, is that if we can get past that.
Could you speak to that? Because we talked about the duality, the dual nature, and we talk about the unity. And really, nature thrives on biodiversity. So we want to honor the multicultural, we want to honor the individual, we want to honor all this myriad themes and its infinite ways of expressing itself while it is part of the whole. So can you just give us some last words on really embracing the infinity and the unity, the
Yeah, what I'm realizing is that duality is not the equivalent of being currently existing within human bodies in this strange civilization we find ourselves.
yeah.
We can be on this earth, we can be in human bodies, but not experiencing the field of duality. And the shamanic cultures are exhibiting them. So the field of duality has to do with when we fracture reality into right and wrong through judgment. Whereas if we look at the world through the eyes of polarity and diversity, this is the way it is in creation. This time and space become a matrix for new possibilities. The mind is not the matrix. Time and space becomes the matrix, where different levels of the mind can come together to orchestrate something bigger than itself. And this is very different from duality, because duality becomes more and more shrunken. It's like we're afraid of the unknown, so we shrink ourselves to fit into a box, Pandora's box. Whereas this cosmovision that we're talking about breaks us out of the box. Same mind, but new connections.
Right.
So rational mind simply becomes a gateway through which higher levels of the mind and even cellular levels of the mind, deep levels of the heart and soul, connections with the universe beyond our current timeline, all of that is welcome. Like Rumi says, bring in all the friends. They're all welcome to the same table.
Yeah.
So that's where
We're all one family, ultimately. We're all one ecosystem, right? We're all one universe.
Yeah.
And like Tony said, like a hive, not as tribes.
Oh,
Like a
thank you,
hive.
Tony.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautifully said.
great. Thank you so much, Kiara. Thank you,
Yeah.
Gary. Thank you, everyone who spoke up. If you have anything last thing to say, raise your hand now. But Paul's going to open up the microphone so we can all say thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. Let me quickly interject for those of you that are
Yeah.
still here. Wednesday, there's been a request for us to do a ceremony of intention dealing with the need for rain in the Southwest of the United States. So anybody who would like to participate, I know that Bianca has been a significant contributor to this for us in the past. So Bianca, if you could schedule that on Wednesday to be with us,
Yeah.
we'd love to set the intention and then really work on.
Yes.
We're dry here, very, very dry.
We actually did a group this morning at 9 o'clock this morning. Some of us here rounded up in Placitas. We do that every once in a while, but also our tribal friends across the river have begun to do their rain dances. And so we're calling in mass because yes, indeed, it is very dry. And, as much as the aquifers kind of replenished this year, it goes down very fast in that high frequency mode we're living in, for sure. Yeah. I wanted to add one really quick thing, Kiara, that you said that really touched me was the way the crop circles happen and they just go boom. And that I know that potential for us to shift our consciousness globally is there just like that. And it can be that instant. I'm hoping for the 100th monkey. Because we're not all 8 billion on the same, I have family in different parts of the world and realize how different the frequencies are just wherever you go. That's why my deep respect for what Paula and Laura are doing and all the people that are coming on. So always great to see kindred
Thank you,
spirits
Bianca. Yeah.
raising the frequency.
I think when we give hope to one another, then we're all willing to throw our game in to this.
Yeah. Every Sunday we do these programs, and afterwards, I mean, let's face it, my consciousness has shifted dramatically from what I felt when I woke up this morning by the fact that I had community, that I was able to break bread with people like yourselves and everything changes, it shifts. I need to, and I always have so much work to do, but all of a sudden, every Sunday is like, I can't pick up a computer, or I just need to sit in that field
The
of
space.
that
The
space
counsel of one
yeah,
another.
that collective consciousness that we just shared.
Yeah, and
So,
bring in the voices
yeah,
of the
All right.
whales and the ancestors and the universe.
this was
Yeah.
the overtime
Thank you.
segment. We appreciate
Okay.
that. All right, Kiara, be safe. We'll
We'll
see
do
you
some more
later this week.
rainmaking with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, rain
Thank
makes
you,
Thank you.
Kiara.
think rain. Bless. Let me quickly interject for those of you that are
Yeah.
still here. Wednesday, there's been a request for us to do a ceremony of intention dealing with the need for rain in the Southwest of the United States. So anybody who would like to participate, I know that Bianca has been a significant contributor to this for us in the past. So Bianca, if you could schedule that on Wednesday to be with us,
Yeah.
we'd love to set the intention and then really work on.
Yes.
We're dry here, very, very dry.
We actually did a group this morning, at 9 o'clock this morning. Some of us here rounded up in Placitas. We do that every once in a while, but also our tribal friends across the river have begun to do their rain dances. And so we're calling in mass because yes, indeed, it is very dry. And, as much as the aquifers, kind of replenished this year, it goes down very fast in that high frequency
Yeah.
mode we're living in, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one really quick thing, Kiara, that you said that really touched me was the way the crop circles happen and they just go boom. And that I know that potential for us to shift our consciousness globally is there just like that. And it can be that instant. I'm hoping for the 100th monkey. Because we're not all 8 billion on the same, I have family in different parts of the world and realize how different the frequencies are just wherever you go. That's why my deep respect for what Paula and Laura are doing and all the people that are coming on. So always great to see kindred
Thank you,
spirits
Bianca. Yeah.
raising the frequency.
I think when we give hope to one another, then we're all willing to throw our game in
Well,
to this.
yeah. Every Sunday we do these programs, and afterwards, I mean, let's face it, my consciousness has shifted dramatically from what I felt when I woke up this morning by the fact that I had community, that I was able to break bread with people like yourselves, and everything changes, it shifts. I need to, and I always have so much work to do, but all of a sudden, every Sunday is like, I can't pick up a computer, or I just need to sit in that field
The
of
space.
The counsel of one another.
Yeah, that collective consciousness that we just shared.
Yeah,
So,
and bring in the voices of the
All right.
whales and the ancestors and the universe.
this was the overtime
Thank you.
segment. We appreciate
Okay.
that. All right, Kiara, be safe. We'll see
We'll
you
do some more
later this week.
rainmaking with you.
Yeah.